We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 12a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the halacha of tofis lebal cho b'makom shechav le'acherim. Let's say a person tries to grab something on behalf of a creditor, but it ends up creating a negative for somebody else. So is that going to be a kinyan or not? And the Gemara wanted to suggest that that's a machlokas tanoim when it comes to payah as well, because the case in the Mishnah talks about a situation where a person picks up payah on behalf of a particular ani, and there was a machlokas tanoim in the Mishnah whether that's going to be a good acquisition or not, and that's the same situation in that case. In that case also, you're taking it for one ani, and then other aniyim are not able to get it. And the Gemara says, Dil Malohi, maybe there's really no comparison between the two cases. Adkan lo kamer Rabbi Eliezer hasam. Rabbi Eliezer only says in the Mishnah over there when it's talking about payah, so he says that the kinyan is going to be effective. Ela demigo di boy mifkar l'hulanichse, because the person picking it up, if he wanted to, he can be mafkir all of his property. V'hava ani, and he can make himself into an ani, a poor person. V'chazi lei, and therefore it would be fit for him. He could really take it for himself. Umigo de zachi lei l'navshi zachi l'chavri, and since he could in theory take it for himself, so he can take it for a different ani. That's why it works over there when you're talking about payah. But over here, but in a standard case of tofis lebalcho b'makom shechav le'acherim, maybe Rabbi Eliezer would say, no, it's not effective, it's not a good kinyan. And you can go the other direction as well. V'yadkan lo kami rabbanon hasam el dechsiv lo selaket lo ani. It's only over there where the Rabbanan say it's not going to be effective, because we darshan, the pasuk says v'leket kitzircha lo selaket lo ani v'lager tazov osam, but we darshan lo selaket lo ani, and we understand that to mean lo selaket lo ani, don't collect for an ani, you can't pick it up on behalf of an ani. Again, the simple explanation of the pasuk is there's a pause after the word selaket, and it means you shouldn't collect it for yourself, you should leave it for the ani. But we understand the pasuk to mean that you can't collect it for a particular ani, so there's a pasuk that says you're not allowed to do that, aval hachalo, but in a standard case of tofis lebalcho b'makom shechav le'acherim, maybe the Rabbanan would say it would be effective. Rabbi Eliezer hai lo selaket my ovidle. Now Rabbi Eliezer, what does he do with the word lo selaket? He uses that for a different halacha. Miboile, he needs that pasuk to teach lahazir lo ani al shalo, to warn an ani on his own field. Rashi over here says lahazir ani al shalo ani haroi litol payah, meaning let's say there's a poor person who's poor enough to take payah for himself. V'yesh lo sad, and he also owns a field. His zero akasav laniach b'payah. So the pasuk is saying that's lo selaket lo ani. Pasuk is saying that he has to leave payah in his own field, even though he's an individual who is fit to be collecting payah. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shem yirtze shelo lazon v'chulu. The Mishnah made a distinction and said that if a person wants to not give mizonos to his eved, he's allowed to do that. He can't do that by his wife, but he's allowed to not provide mizonos for his eved. And the Gemara says, Shamat mina, do we see from the Mishnah the following? Yachol harav lomar le'eved, that a master can say to his eved, Asei imi, work for me, ve'eni zanchan, I'm not going to support you. It seems like that's exactly what our Mishnah is saying, that the eved is still his eved, but he doesn't have to give him his zonos. And the Gemara says, no, hacha b'mayaskin, and here what are we dealing with? Diyamar lei, that what he's actually telling the eved is, he's not saying work for me, and I'm not going to give you him mizonos. What he's really saying is, Tzi ma'asi yodecha le'mizonosecha. You do your work, but that work, the earnings, your earnings, you can use for your own mizonos, you'll support yourself. That's what the master is allowed to say to the eved. That's all the Mishnah means to say. But the Gemara says if that's true, the chavasa gabe isha. But then by the wife, we said that the husband is not allowed to tell that to his wife, but that's not true. He could say to her also that take your earnings for yourself. I won't take your earnings, and then I won't have to support you. In that sense, eved and isha should be exactly the same. And so the Gemara says, Isha Milo. So if that's the case by a wife, why is it not the case? Meaning, why are we saying only by an Eved that we say it's a full zuchus, it's a full benefit for him to go free, but by a wife also we should say it's a full benefit because he doesn't have to support the wife. He's able to tell her that she should use her own earnings to support herself. And so the Gemara says, no, Isha b'delo safka. We're talking about a wife. She's not able, in a situation where she's not able to support herself with her maisi yadeha, with her earnings, and so therefore he's not able to tell her that because she can't support herself. So he's going to have to support her. But the Gemara says, Evan nami b'delo safek. But a slave also, I can come up with a case where he's not able to support himself and he's not able to say that to the Eved. So it seems identical. But the Gemara says, no, they're different because avda dinahom karse lo shavia lemari lemarse lemay misboy. If you have an Eved who can't even support his own stomach, so to speak, he can't even make enough mizonos to support himself. So then, what do his owners even need him for? He's not even useful to the owner. So therefore, that's why by an Eved, if the Eved's not able to support himself, it doesn't matter. He can still say, the owner can still say, support yourself, and then I don't have to give you mizonos. But by a person's wife, the husband is not able to say that. And Rashi explains, Avda dinahom karsi lo shavya evet sheino shava lechem achla, meaning an evet's not even worth the amount of bread to feed him. He can't even support himself. Lemore mai misbay. What does the owner need him for? Hilkach eino mosav mishalo, meaning to say, by an evet, let's say the owner tells the evet, support yourself, and the evet's not able to, so the owner does not have to add anything. The owner doesn't have to give the evet anything extra to help him. He needs to go begging at people's doors. Why should the owner be forced to give from his own to support this evet? Aval isha, but by a wife, that's not the case. The husband has to actually add if the wife is not able to support herself, because that's part of the conditions of the ksuba, that you're going to be supported from my property. And so again, that's why when it comes to a wife, so it's not considered to be a total zechus for her to be divorced because she is supported, but by the evet, he's not really supported. The owner can always say, support yourself. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here the following proof. Evet shagala la'ari miklat, let's say you have an Evet, and he goes to Ari Miklat, he goes into exile because he killed someone by mistake. Ein rabo chayev lezuno, so the master is not chayev to give him his onus to support him. V'lo, not only that, ala shemaisa yadav l'rabo, that all of his earnings actually go to his master. And so the Gemara says, Shmamina, you see from here, Yachol arav lomer li'evet, that a master could say to his Evet, Ase imi, work for me, ve'eni zonchan, I'm not going to support you, you have to go begging by people's doors. And the Gemara says, no, here what are we talking about? The master does say to the Evet, whatever you earn, you can use for your mizonos. So the Gemara says, that doesn't make sense. If so, what does it mean when it says that his earnings go to the master? They don't go to the master. The earnings are being used for his own mizonos. And so the Gemara says, no, the Brisa just means lahadafa. The Brisa just means if the Evet earns anything extra beyond what he needs to support himself, that extra goes to the master. And the Gemara says hadafa pshita, but if there's any extra, it's obvious that it goes to the master. Gemara says it's not necessarily obvious. Ma'u detema, what might you have said? Since if he doesn't make enough, so the owner doesn't have to give him any extra, he has to go begging. So maybe you'll say if the Evet makes a little extra, so the owner shouldn't take from him. In other words, the idea would be the Evet makes a little extra sometimes. He can save that for a future time where he's not going to make enough. Kamash Malan, that's what it's teaching us now, that if there's extra, it goes to the owner. But the Gemara continues, but if this is the case, why are we talking specifically about a case of the Evet going to the Ari Miklat? In any situation of Evet, this halacha is true, and the Gemara says not necessarily, you might have thought, it says in the Pasuk, that the person goes to the Ari Miklat and lives, it means you have to give him more of a life when he's in the Ari Miklat, and so maybe in that situation he would be able to keep the extra. Kamash Malan, that's what it's teaching us, even in the Ari Miklat, he's not able to keep anything extra, it all goes to the master. But the Gemara continues, but what does it say at the end of that brisa? It says, Aval isha shagolsa li'ari miklat, but if you have a wife that's exiled to the Ari Miklat, to the Ir Miklat, bala chayiv b'mizonos, so there the husband is chayiv to provide her mizonos. So the Gemara says, Mechlal de lo amar la. Now that sounds like he didn't say to her that you should support yourself with your earnings. The amar la bala, because if her husband said to her that she should support herself with her own earnings, amai chayiv. So why is he chayiv to support her in that situation? What does it mean the husband is chayiv b'mizonos? He's not chayiv. She should be supporting herself with her own earnings. And from the fact that the end of the brisa is talking about a case where the husband does not tell her to support herself with her own earnings, so at the beginning of the brisa also by an Evet, he's not telling him to support himself with his own earnings. It must be the situation over there is ase imi ve'eni zoncha. There's no obligation for the master to support the slave, even if all the earnings are going to the master. And the Gemara answers, Liolam damar le, really this brisa is talking about a situation where he tells the Evet to support himself, and again also by the wife, he tells her to support herself. V'isha b'delo safka. But the case over here is that the wife is not able to support herself, and as we said earlier, when the wife is not able to support herself, so then the husband does have to support her. But the Gemara continues, V'amidiktani seifa, but from the fact that it says at the end of this brisa, that if he says to his wife, you should support yourself, he's allowed to say that to her. That does imply that in the beginning of the brisa we're talking about a situation where he did not tell her to support herself, and again likewise by the Evet, he did not tell the Evet to support himself, and it seems like we're saying that the master could say to the Evet, Ase imi ve'eni zoncha, you should work for me, all of your earnings go to me, and I will not support you. But the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. Here's really what's being said in this brisa. The end of the brisa is saying, ve'im maspekis, if she is able to support herself. V'yamar lot, si ma'aseh yadayich b'mezonasayich, and he tells her, take your earnings in order to support yourself. Rashoy, that he's allowed to do. He can tell his wife to support herself if she is able to do so. But the Gemara says if that's the case, Meseches my lememra. But if she's able to support herself, what's the chiddush? Of course he can tell her to support herself if she's able to support herself. And the Gemara says to that, because what might you have said, Kol kavod bas melech penima, when it comes to the daughter of the king, the real honor is that she stays inside, meaning to say that she doesn't go out, she doesn't work for herself, and therefore maybe it's not appropriate for him to tell her to do that, even if she is able to. Kamash molon. That's what the Bryce is telling us, that no, if she's able to support herself, the husband is allowed to tell her to support herself. And the Gemara continues, Lema ketanoi, let us suggest that this is a machlokas tanoim, meaning whether a master can tell the Eved, Asei imi ve'eni zoncha, that you have to work for me, all of your earnings go to me, and I will not provide you mizonos, I will not support you. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel lomer, yochel Eved lomer l'rabo b'shnei betzores, o parneseni, o hitzieni l'cheiros. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that an Eved can say to his master, let's say it's a years of famine, he can say either support me, or you have to let me go free. In other words, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the Eved is the one that's able to tell that to the master. The master cannot say, Asei imi ve'eni zoncha. The Chachamim say, no, Hershus biyad Rabbo. The choice really is in the hands of the master. My lav, b'hakam iflagi, isn't this the exact machlokas? The Mar Savar Yochel, the Mar Savar. Yochel, one says the master is able to say, Asei imi ve'eni zoncha, and the other one says the master is not able to say, Asei imi ve'eni zoncha. But the Gemara responds, V'tizbra, is that really logical? Hi o parneseni o hotzieni l'cheiros. Over here, when Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, the Eved says, either support me or let me free, that's not what it should say. O parneseni o tein ma'aseh yodeh b'parnasasi mi boile. What it should say is, either support me or let me support myself with my own earnings. That's actually what Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is saying, if the point over here is that the master is not able to say, Asei imi ve'eni zoncha. V'yoden further, ma'ishna b'shnei batzoros. Why is it that the Braisa is talking specifically about years of famine? You don't need to talk about years of famine. This is a general machlokas, whether it's possible for the master to say, Asei imi ve'eni zoncha. So the Gemara says, rather, what are we talking about over here in this brisa? What's the machlokas between Rav Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim? The Yomar Lo, that he says to him, say, he tells him, you have to support yourself. You have to keep your earnings and support yourself. I'm not going to support you. And what's happening is, these are years of famine, and he's not able to support himself. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, in such a situation, the Eved can say, either support me or let me go free. Because if you let me go free, people will have mercy on me and they'll be able to support me. But the Rabbanan say, no, there's no difference. If someone, just like someone might have mercy on a free man, they'll also have mercy on an Eved. The Eved can't say, let me go free, because that way people will have mercy on me. They'll have the same amount of mercy either way, so there's no demand here that the Eved can make to ask the master to let him go free. And Rashi over here says, going on the Gemara earlier about the wife and the Yer Miklat, Penima Tzenua, a woman has to be modest. So you might think, it's not really her way to go around and try to make a parnas in a city that she's not even from. So they don't recognize her. They're not going to be able to bring her work in the house because they don't know her. She's going to have to go around the city and try to find work, and you might think that's not appropriate, and therefore you might think that the husband cannot say to her, even if she's able to do it, he can't say to her to support herself. And so that's what the Bryce is teaching. He is able to say that to her. And Rashi also explains, V'yod ma'ishna shnei batzoros. Again, if you're saying that the machlokas tanoim between Rav Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim has to do with Asei imi ve'eni zoncha, why does it have to be specifically in years of famine? Afilu b'shnei sov, even if it's regular years of plenty, kevan damer le asei imi, if the owner told the slave, work for me and I'm not going to support you, harehein lo shnei batzoros. For the Eved, it's a shnei batzoros. For the Eved, that is a famine. It's the exact same situation. And Rav Shimon ben Gamliel should say the same thing. He should say that the Eved can make this demand from the master. And then the Gemara said that according to the Chachamim, Mand Merachim Avnei Choria Avda Nami Merachim the Shayich b'mitzvahs Keisha. Somebody who has mercy on a free man will also have mercy on a slave, because a slave is Shayich in mitzvahs just like a woman. So he'll have mercy on the individual, whether he's a slave or whether he's free. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, the following proof, the Yomar Rav, because Rav says, Hamakdish Yidei Avda. Let's say a person is makdish the hands of his Eved, meaning all the work that the Eved does, all of those earnings are going to go to Hekdish. Also, a Eved Lovev Yochel V'yosa Poreh. What that Eved does is he should borrow in order to support himself, and he'll eat from what he borrows, and then he'll work in order to pay off those loans. And so the Gemara says, Shmamino, you see from here, Yochel Rav Lomer LeEved Asei imi ve'eni zoncha, that an Eved is able, a master rather, is able to say to his Eved, work for me and I won't support you, because that's exactly what's happening over here. He's being makdish yidei avdu. He's saying that all the work that the Eved does, the Eved is not going to be able to use for himself, and so the Eved now has to go begging in order to be supported. And the Gemara says, no, the case over here is that the master actually is supporting the Eved. The Eved is doing work, that work goes to Hektish, and the master is taking care of the Eved. But the Gemara says, if that's the case, if so, lamai, so what's the need for this Eved to borrow? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis.